And you guys have done a really great job of drafting, especially over the last couple of years. And I'm thinking of guys like Quenton Nelson and Darius Leonard. But I was wondering if you could just kind of illustrate either those guys or maybe other individuals that we're not aware of that can kind of come in and have that ripple effect of the intangibles that they bring and kind of build that winning culture that you desire on your team.
Yeah. So first of all, when we think about culture, we think about that's our collective identity. That's who we are as a team. And so to me, if you think about the character of a player, what is the culture of your organization but the sum character of your team? And for us, we have been very deliberate. Coach and Chris have been it's been a very deliberate process to get the right kind of guys on the bus. We took the time to define what it is that we're looking for in a player. And I think most organizations do that. I just don't see we don't deviate from it as much. I think having values or having attributes or all that stuff, if it's not reflected in the way you make decisions, then it's not as important as you say it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for us, we see the culture of our organization, the character of our players and team. We believe that's a source of competitive advantage. We think it's part of the glue that keeps them together during both good times and bad. And, so 2018 was the first draft that, Chris had. Well, he had 17 draft, but it's basically he was hired in. You're brought in late in the process. But in 2018, that was our first year. We had our systems in place. We had everything. We knew what we were going to. We were able to execute the full cycle of the process. And, character was very front of mind in that process. Was it the most important thing? No, it's not. Like, I'll tell you again, character is not a substitute for talent. Character is not a substitute for talent. But I do believe that character, specifically the developmental aspects of it, is the bridge between talent and performance. I think character with an emphasis on the development's the bridge between talent and performance. So we were very conscious in the decisions we were making in free agency as well as in the draft on who we were bringing on board. And I'll give you an example of one, and I've told this story several times, but Quenton Nelson. So first of all, teams typically just don't take guards fifth in the draft. They don't do that. That's, typically there's this positional value and they're not seen as, whatever, most people would have had that on down the line. But for us, Quenton was special. Quenton was really special to us, and the parts of his story that really, really resonated with me was, I talked to him about, why did you go to Notre Dame? And he said, and, I'm paraphrasing this and I may mess a bit of this up, but I think it's like generally correct. He said, they had the top recruiting classes in the nation a couple of years in a row before I got there. And then I immediately say, well, why do you want to go someplace where you have these entrenched starters, you have multiple great recruiting classes in front of you? A lot of people avoid those. They go someplace where the pathway to playing is a little quicker. And he was quick and just very matter of fact in saying that, because if I can't beat them out, I'm never going to make it to the NFL anyway. And then further we go along and we talk about coaches, and he brought up Harry Hiestand. And I was like, he said, of all the places that I went, he goes, I felt like going to Notre Dame was best for my development. So he's taken the long view. He's not saying that's where I can play early or that's where I can do X, Y, and Z. He goes, I thought it would be best for my long-term development. That tells you that he's intrinsically driven. He's about growth and development, about continuously getting better. And I don't think he'll ever drop that. Do we all want to be successful? Sure. But if you live in the world where you're fueled by external accolades, at some point in time, you're going to find yourself in a desert. And, whether that be a slump or an injury or something where all the praise and all that stuff that's external goes away. And if you don't have it in your heart, a strong internal drive, you don't weather that storm. You're not able to sustain that motivation that allows you to work through an injury or to overcome a setback or whatever that might be. So Quenton had that inner drive. And then another thing was, he talks about getting there, and he said, I get there and he goes, I'm not doing well in school. My girlfriend breaks up with me and I'm getting my ass kicked every day in practice, and it's like, that's not what he wanted. He thought he was going to be able to play early, but he very quickly understood how difficult it was going to be. And a lot of people in that moment would have said, and I hear this a lot, well, I got to wait my turn. I got to wait my turn. And that isn't what he said. He said he ran Harry crazy that fall, meeting with him after, he's meeting with him after and getting more, and he's just talking through, and he's, people in practice are getting mad at him because he's practicing too hard, running cards against the defense. But, that kind of shows you that it's that unwillingness to accept the status quo. I knew that for everyone, it's going to be a struggle making that transition as you come up to performing at your highest level. But I knew that he would handle any setback better. And then, I'd say lastly about that, even though he's not the most talkative person, he has a way he carries himself and a toughness and a way that he puts team first that's contagious. And to me, if your first rounders, if your best players are the best people on your team, you're going to be in a good spot. Where you're going to find trouble at is if the best players on your team are not your best people. They don't have to be your best, but they need to be essentially standard bearers for what you're trying to do as an organization. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself where you're conflicted between what you're getting and how it's being done. And so for me, Quenton was a great first pick for us because, he stood for everything that we had just went through in building that model. He stood for everything. And we knew that he would make our team tougher and that he would be a future leader. And I think he's a two-time captain now. He'll probably be 3 here. And he was a 2-time captain at Notre Dame. And when we get to the top, he'll be a big part of that success. Not just in the way he plays, but the influence that he has on those around him.
Correct. And the ripple effect of intangibles is so strong, just in general, but in particular, when you can take your best player or the people that represent your culture the most, and everybody can point to that one person and say, this is what we stand for. This is who we want to strive to be. And I think it's interesting listening to you talk about it, because I think the misconception and where a lot of teams go wrong is they think like the more premium the draft asset or like the acquisition cost, it's like the bigger chance they have to take on talent. And I think it's almost the exact opposite. It's almost like you want to make sure, you would almost rather have a guy maybe with less talent, not saying that this is Quenton, but the value of the 5th pick in the draft, you don't take an inside interior lineman. Well, if he is going to be a great player in terms of his stature in the league at that position, and he represents everything you want your culture to be, that's a much safer pick. That's a better pick for a lot of teams than just saying, oh, well, we need a shutdown corner or a left tackle. But we don't really know about the character, but man, like this guy's 6'7", et cetera, et cetera. I think a lot of teams go wrong there. And I think you see it in the best teams is that their best players are directly aligned with the culture they're trying to build.
No.
And please.
I do think, for us, Chris makes the decisions, Ed runs the process, we all provide input. But when you have talent and you have character and there's a clear pathway on your team for that person to make an impact early, you get excited. But I definitely would agree with the characterization that you made.